Welcome back to the NIL Era Podcast. My name is Elise, Byun.
And I'm Fernando Andrade. We've had a couple of episodes with some amazing guests recently, and I highly recommend you go check that out. Episodes 19, 18, 17, all great episodes. But today's episode is back to just our co-hosts, Elise and myself, with some updates and more conversations in the NIL era. Obviously, something we've really worked on is the consistency and real-time updates that happen within this space. And if you go through past episodes, we literally try and record it on the spot. As of right now, this episode will be coming out Monday after the US elections 2024. So, with that being said, can you explain the significance and connection that we've been seeing of college sports to the elections, not only presidential even, but also in Congress, and how that will impact the NIL landscape?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's important to acknowledge that sports and politics do have a relationship. I think most people see it very much so. It's sports separately, politics separately, but even just looking in the media, athletes are some of the most followed people on all platforms and hold just a lot of weight in how they influence those around them. Speaking in a very nonpartisan way, I just believe for student athletes, you have a responsibility to show up for those in your community that show up for you every week, week in and week out. Those are the people coming to your games, asking for autographs, cheering you on every weekend. So I truly do believe that student athletes should be civically engaged. But I think these past couple of weeks, you've seen it by just watching your TV. Front office sports reports politicians are using college football games as opportunities to promote their candidacies, observing that NFL games provide more eyeballs, but college football provides access to a more targeted demographic. College football specifically offers a strategic opportunity for the presidential candidates. Many of the most popular schools are located in those swing states, and many rivalries remain regional despite the conference realignment we've been seeing. But this provides candidates with access to a large number of viewers, likely residing and thus voting in those swing states they're hoping to target. Both former President Trump and now current President Trump and VP Kamala Harris have flooded the airwaves with those campaign ads you see on college football Saturdays. Trump and Harris received a larger portion of overall impressions from college football than any other sport, excluding the NFL, according to the data shared with Front Office Sports. So it's clear there is a relationship, and that demographic of who is watching college football and who is engaging in this sport, that is what's being looked at. More so on the NIL front, it's been apparent that the NCAA has been calling on Congress. Like you said, this is not just about the presidential election, it's about everything surrounding it as well. But the NCAA has been calling on Congress to help settle some of the chaos that has been happening with college sports. We've talked about it before on this podcast. And whether that's asking for uniform NIL laws, the employment protections, or antitrust exemptions, there is a component of politics in college sports. For this presidential campaign and election and everything surrounding it, there are also implications for college sports. The overall makeup of Congress following this election will have a significant bearing on the entire notion of amateurism in college athletics and whether athletes are classified as employees. Control of both the Senate and the House, determined on a state by state and district by district level, will also reshape the leadership of key panels, such as the Senate Commerce Committee, that will dictate the flow of bills related to college sports. One staffer in the House said that the results of the presidential election and now control of the Senate, quote, great for college presidents and conference commissioners, but it's bad for the athletes that their salaries are based on. I'm personally hopeful there will still be a bipartisan bill when it comes to college athletics, but it's now more likely the NCAA will get a protection prohibiting athlete employment and potentially granted those antitrust protections they've been asking for. I think the conversation of how/if Title IX will be implemented into revenue share is still very questionable. Title IX laws don't pertain to employment relationships, which is obviously another factor when thinking about whether student athletes should be classified as employees. So it's very complicated. Politics is very much so embedded into college athletics, and it's pretty cool that we were able to make this podcast. It happened to be a big election year, so I'm excited to see what comes about of this in terms of college athletics.
Well, it's been the whole year, right, that we've been waiting for this election. Obviously, for any American, you've been waiting for it, but specifically within the NIL space, I think we're really just waiting for whatever the transition will end up being in January of 2025. As of right now, the House has not been called, but the Senate has. So just understanding how that's going to impact these laws will be very interesting just to see the future of college sports. I think it also should be noted that the current president of the NCAA is a former politician, right? He was a Republican in a very blue state, the most popular governor in the United States back then when he was a Republican governor of Massachusetts. So Charlie Baker has experience there. I think it's one of the main reasons why he was chosen by the NCAA to be in those shoes, to have these conversations with Congress, whichever committee is set up for it. So I think it'll be very, very interesting to see what will happen, especially with whatever the House results are. But it'll just be really cool to see the intersection. For me personally, I'm both. I mean, obviously, I like sports a lot, but I was also a poli sci major, so it's super fascinating to see the relationships and how they intertwine. And yeah, just exciting. I think it's exciting. I think it'll be good overall. And we will continue to do our best to talk about these topics in a way that's just presentable for everybody, as it should be, right? But I think that's what I'm most excited about in the year to come.
I think that's a great point that you made just right there, of that intersection of sports and politics. Charlie Baker himself being a politician, being a student athlete at Harvard. So he was a student athlete and then got involved in politics, now back in sports, but still holding so much of that experience that he held. And I think even on election day, speaking from experience, and hopefully we can bring this person on as a guest as well, but there were many student athletes doing NIL deals around civic engagement and getting out there and voting. So I think there's so much good that is happening in terms of that sports and politics intersection. So thank you for highlighting that right there, because great point.
I mean, there's Charlie Baker, there's the civic engagement. At least at Cal, there's Go Bears, Go Vote. In the NCAA, there's the all vote, no play. So, like, it's a very, very big deal. I think, again, objectively, we can all say civic responsibilities are extremely important. And I think student athletes, as role models for those in their communities, have a great opportunity to do so, right? So, obviously, everybody's is entitled to their own opinions, and I would encourage everybody to educate themselves on it. But even now that we're past the elections, it'll be very, very important to continue educating ourselves and following along to understand, of course, I mean, broader topics. There are bigger topics in the world of politics than the NIL landscape, but specifically for student athletes, it'll be super cool to follow along and understand what the decisions are and why they are made that way, because they will quite literally impact the future of college athletics. So I'm just really excited. Honestly, I'm excited that we get to have the ball rolling now, because it's been several months of just waiting for whoever comes in next to make a decision. It's been on a pause for this entire year. So I'm just ready to get this thing started and see where college athletics goes next. Now transitioning to On3's NIL top 10 valuation list that just dropped. I think it'd be a good idea to break it down and inspect what this means. So, could you tell me a bit more about this list? Who's on it? Why is it important?
I don't think this list is anything surprising in terms of the top 10 NIL valuation. It consisted of 6 football players, 3 basketball players, and 1 women's gymnast. Shout out. Now, I think it's important to look at this list and discuss the quote marketplace value that we've consistently talked about on the podcast. Clearly, there is an outlier of Livy Dunn on this list as the women's gymnast who took the second spot with $4 million from NIL. So, does that mean the marketplace value for a Power 5 women's gymnast is millions of dollars? Definitely not. But I think seeing these numbers and seeing who is attached to these numbers is important. With that being said, and the tip-off of college basketball season earlier this week, freshman Cooper Flagg from Duke is ranked 5th on this list with $2.6 million. He was the number 1 recruit, projected first overall pick in the NBA draft, and has already shown his value to his Duke men's basketball team earlier this week against Maine, that they played their season opener. Great game. But recently there's been talks about the number 1 recruit out of the class of 2025. His name is AJ DiBonza, being offered NIL packages north of $3 million in his recruitment process. He has recently inked a deal, reportedly worth over $4 million with Nike, which is clearly an unprecedented figure for an athlete yet to play a single minute of college basketball. This partnership really just exemplifies the talent and explosive growth of NIL. I think it redefines the expectations for those high school prospects and the new ceiling for marketplace values, especially for college basketball players. And I know we go back and forth on the true NIL meaning, so I'm interested to see, Fernando, what you think here, especially for a recruit who has yet to touch the college court.
So for me, my take is you look at AJ's Instagram, right? And he has 317,000 Instagram followers. So Nike approaching him and offering him this huge deal, that is true NIL. They are taking a bet on this kid. They are investing in him and in his future, thinking that, you know what, this deal will be worth so much more in a couple of months or even a few years. Like, I want this kid on my side. He has the following. He's a really good athlete. He'll probably end up at a big school and have a spotlight on him. So Nike signing him is true NIL. What isn't true NIL, what's superficial or synthetic NIL, if you will, is the recruiting process approaching him and saying, you know what, like, this school is going to offer you 4 million or 3 million, whatever it is. That to me is not okay. Why is it not okay? Because I just want there to be a clear written law, bringing it back to politics, that says this is allowed. You know what? We're in pay for play right here. This is allowed. Let it happen. There is no way that for community service or for one speech a year, they're going to pay this kid $4 million. That's not what they're paying him for. They're paying him to play on their team to win. That's what's happening. No speech is worth $4 million at a community service event. Like that's not how this works. This isn't philanthropy, right? So if you're going to want this to happen, I'm okay with it. I just want somebody to say, look, here is section blah, 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 saying that it's okay. And any school can do this moving forward. And we're going to be transparent about it. And we're going to say that everybody can do this regardless of state. That's what I'm waiting on.
Well, they can. They technically can. They can.
Okay, but what's the wording around it? Is it, oh, so you can play on my team? Because that's what it is. We're talking about, the distinction is pay for play versus, oh, for an appearance at my event for this sort of work. Otherwise, it's pay for play. If we're going to say in written text, oh, it's okay to do, dude, okay, go ahead. You're worth that.
It's okay for your collective to speak to recruits and your collective and your whatever to offer collective pack. Like that is totally allowed. We're going to get into it a little later. That is purely pay for play, because technically these collectives, like, it's them saying, if you come here, if you do your community service, whatever, you get $4 million. And for me, it's like, yes, clearly it's pay for play and everyone's doing it, whatever, but technically it's also just you being recruited and these programs seeing in a prospect, whatever, that they will add so much more to a program. Like today, I forget what article it was, but they were comparing the Zion Williamson at Duke versus the Cooper Flagg era. Very similar to the Caitlin Clark effect. people believe that Cooper Flagg will do what Zion Williamson did for Duke in this current day. They were comparing numbers of ticket sales when Zion was at Duke at away games, and they were seeing those ticket prices jump about $100. The Duke at UNC game went from like $100 a ticket to over $900 a ticket. So they're anticipating that Cooper Flagg does the same thing this year. I am betting money that they assume this AJ recruit is going to do the same exact thing. Whatever program he goes to, he's probably going to be in college for 1 year, and then he's going to go to the draft and he's going to play in the NBA. Similar to Cooper Flagg, he's going to play 1 year in college, go to the draft. So it's these programs banking that these recruits are going to be that guy in the college space, and that is pay for play. That's, if anything, that's hopeful play. Like, they're just hoping they continue to be the recruit they are and be that influence that they are. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to see the real, if we're going to distinguish these different types of deals, the real NIL that he's already done, and then the collective NIL, because his parents have come out on multiple interviews and have just said, like, we're not letting him see the money in terms of the collectives. The collectives have to call the parents and talk to them about it because they want their son to make a decision purely off what program and what coach do you vibe with the best to set yourself up for so much more. Because, like, even talking to Sion, that decision, it was not for this 1 year. It was for so much more. He wants to go play in the league. He wants to go to the draft. He wants to earn so much more money than that $850,000 that was offered to him by said other school. These people are looking long term, and that's really interesting to think because he's probably 16 years old, 17 years old, which is crazy to think about.
But you do understand what I'm saying, though. Like, these collectives aren't openly saying, oh, here is your check so that you can play on my team. That's what bothers me. Like, I just want things to be said the way they are.
Yeah.
Is it happening? Yes, I'm okay with it. But to me, it's like, then why are you lying to my face? You're like, no, I don't care if the contract says, oh, it's for community service, and the kid actually shows up. There is no community service on planet Earth that is worth $4 million. That isn't a thing. I remember, even to bring up like a weird example, right? That just came off the top of my head. Like, when I think it was Nike or some competing brand that offered Kim Kardashian $1 million to do a marketing deal. And Kanye West was like, oh, please don't do it because I'm with Yeezy, and then ended up giving her the money, right? Kim Kardashian's marketing was worth $1 million. On what planet is a marketing of some college student worth $4 million? It's not. It's for their athletics. Their athletics are worth $4 million because they will skyrocket ticket prices, not for their name, image, and likeness, for their play, the same way Zion did. Zion Williamson was skyrocketing tickets because everybody wanted to see him dunk. They didn't want to see him on the sidelines. And I know for a fact they didn't want to see him on the sidelines because if he was injured, what would have happened to those ticket prices?
Dropped.
So you're not paying this kid to show up and show your NIL. You're paying this kid so he can 360 dunk on whatever freshman's on your team. Like, that's what you're trying to see. That, to me, is the issue. You know, like, whoever's in Congress, sign that bill, let it pass. Pay for play is now a thing. All right, fantastic, go ahead. But until that isn't a thing, my biggest worry is, what loopholes are we going to continue to find, and how are we going to level this out? It's already not level because of the amounts of money. But if every state gets to decide on their own, how is it fair? How is it fair? I'll give you a separate example. If in the NFL, every region or every state had different rules for their teams, how would that be fair? It wouldn't. So why are we doing that in college football? Why are we doing that in college basketball? No professional sports do that. Nobody. They're all under one law. That's my issue. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I just want everybody to have the same rule. That's it. If you want to pay them, pay them. Are they worth that? Sure. Look at the tickets. It's a reflection. It is. But then again, you go into several things that I'm not sure people are ready to talk about. All right, you paid for that ticket. He got injured. Are you going to get pissed off? Sure. But again, you are buying a ticket to go watch Duke, not to watch Cooper. And you start playing around with that, right? Like when my brother wants to go watch the Lakers, he wants to go watch LeBron James. If LeBron gets injured the day before, he's going to be super sad. But the Lakers aren't going to give me our money back because we paid a ticket for the LA Lakers. So how do you distinguish that? It's a whole mess. Cooper isn't going to play on his own. Extremely talented kid. I wish him the best, but there's 4 other people on the court with him at the same time. How do you balance that out? It's a shit show, which is why you need a law that says this is how it's going to be split. There is more than one person on the team. Let's figure out how this revenue sharing is going to work. Let's figure out how this pay for play is going to work. And let's figure out how we're going to save other sports in the process. Because if you're thinking again at a national level, what about the Olympic sports? They're going to have to get cut. And we've talked about this prior and we'll talk about this in the future, but it's bigger than just, oh yeah, let me offer him $4 million to recruit him. Nike can do whatever they want, but the school, that's why I have an issue. End of rant.
Well, to go off that pay for play, because it's a beautiful transition into this. So something interesting that has been reported is the collective at University of Pittsburgh, or Pitt. So Pitt is currently off to one of the best program starts of being 7-0 when we record this. And Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports had reported something that has been kind of touched on of what happened with UNLV's starting quarterback drama. But Dellinger reported that, quoting, the Pittsburgh head coach worked with Alliance 412, the preferred NIL collective of Pitt Athletics, to revamp the entire distribution model for the team. It's transitioned from paying every player on the team in a tier system to paying players who earn it. Chris Bickle, the founder of Alliance 412, who donated $20 million in 2021, has been a leading figure in the overhaul. The Pitt head coach said, I sat down with some of the guys and told them, you're not getting paid. I told them that the guy investing in you isn't happy. I said, if you were an investor putting your money down and you win 3 games, what would you do? The kid said, Coach, I wouldn't give it. And that's what he's doing. You've got to earn it. Dellinger further reported that Bickle said that those who earn it will be paid after the season. Bickle told Dellinger that Pitt knows it has high value players, some of who are producing at a very high level and not being paid a ton, but negotiating will take place at the end of the season. And we've talked about it here on this podcast, especially with that UNLV quarterback and that whole situation of student athletes want to negotiate terms mid-season, and especially doing it before that redshirting period. So if they don't get paid, they can go in the transfer portal, reserve that season of eligibility. So the way that Pitt is potentially doing it, I assume, is interesting and a different way to look at it in terms of those contracts and getting what you earn, using the words they did, but that is 100% pay for play, clearly.
All right, let's use this example, right? Let's use this example. All right, I'm just gonna pay the guys I like. Oh, so you only need those 11 guys to win? Is that what you're saying? So like the rest of the team has nothing to do with your results. The guys that show up every single day, practice players even, like if you don't need them, like can they just leave? Is that what you're saying?
No,
Because you're basing it on the wins, right? Like that's what the guy's saying. Oh, based on our wins, we're 7-0. All right, like if you only want to pay the select guys, that all right, cut everybody else then, and see what happens.
It's not cutting. It's like them not getting NIL or the collective whatever. But realistically, practice players are not getting collective money, or they're not getting that collective money. You know what I'm saying?
That's what I'm saying. But in what world is that fair? Like, how is that a team? If that makes sense. Like, all right, maybe these practice players All right, maybe you do need them. Are they all on scholarship? Are they getting something in return? If you're going to step into this professional atmosphere, which again, I'm totally okay with, step into the pro sphere. But even on pro teams, the minimum wage for NFL, if you've checked it out, is at $500,000. Those guys live very nice lives. Very, very, very nice lives. Here, are all these guys on scholarship even?
Well, so then that introduces the conversation of employment. That's not the NILs. That's employment.
Well, yeah.
NIL is name, image, and likeness. Should a bench player be getting the same amount as starting QB? No. That does not happen. If you are trying to get money for the amount of work you put in, that is employment. That is the minimum wage for your 20-hour weeks.
So you understand what my issue is when there's a loophole for pay for play. You understand what I mean now? Because this isn't about how many eyeballs are you getting on my screen. The comment you read from Yahoo Sports isn't about eyeballs, isn't about name, image, and likeness, isn't about brands. It's about what's the record. And whoever's helping me get that record is getting the money. I'm sorry, is it not the whole team that's together? Or are we playing only 30% of the team? Like the 70% of the team, do they not matter for the record? Because that's who you're paying, right? That is pay for play. That is my big argument. I don't mind if you want to do employment. Pay whoever you want to pay. Just have it written down. Because that's not NIL. That is not NIL. In no world is that NIL. If you're basing the money off of the record, how on earth is that NIL?
I think it's hard because technically in the rule book, like collectives are allowed to do everything they're doing right now. That's allowed. Because collectives are so independent. This is all allowed. That's my thing. Is like they are not in the wrong. It is unfortunate that this is the reality for most programs, but this is how it is being run because in the rule book, this is allowed.
Sadly, I think my argument to overall and why I've been waiting for there to be federal legislation to say this is how it works and we're all going to do this, because just because it's allowed in one state doesn't mean it's allowed in another state. And we're not going to get into the nitty gritty, but you know what I'm talking about. My issue with that is, why aren't we being open about this? Like, why is the contract not saying if there's an invoice, right, for the work being done, why can't we just say, look, athlete for this team? Because that's the truth. The fact that you can't openly say it means you're hiding something. So even if it's, oh, I'm hiding something within the rule books, it's not ethical. It's not moral. To me, what if the question is what would make me happy, and my commentary here, for a student athlete to be able to come out one day and say, I'm getting paid this much for my performance, which is the truth. That's the truth. I'm not against getting paid. I'm not against collectives. I'm not against employment. I'm against having to find loopholes to make something work. That's it. That's my only issue. So again, is it fair? Maybe, but it sucks when it's about the record, because I cannot imagine looking some of my past teammates in the face, in the eyes, and telling them, our 7-0 record, we're undefeated thanks to those 11 guys, but you 11, you haven't done jack shit for the team. So you're not worth the same amount as those 11 because they've done more for the team than you have. All right, next practice, show up, like have those 11 not show up, and let's see what the record's going to be moving forward. That's my issue. College football. Could you explain the process of this expanded college football playoff? It's the first time that we're seeing the 4 teams expand to a 12 team format in playoffs. It's early November. We're starting to get close. So what's the situation here?
Yeah, so if Tuesday night wasn't already a busy night, the CFP decided to also announce their first rankings of the season. So just like in previous years, the CFP selection committee will reveal its top 25 teams each Tuesday throughout the remainder of the season, which then culminates in the first 12-team playoff bracket to be revealed on December 8th. At the end of the season, the 12 participating CFP teams will be in the 5 conference champions. In all likelihood, it's going to be the Power 4 champions and one Group of 5 champion that will probably be ranked 12th, plus the next 7 highest ranked teams. So the 4 highest ranked conference champions will get first round buys, even if one or multiple non-conference champions are ranked above them. So that means multiple teams inside the top 12 could be left out of the CFP, and there will be no reseeding after the first round. So the number 1 seed will play the winner of number 8 versus number 9 matchup, etc. Teams will then be seeded 5th through 8th teams seeded 5th through 8th will host first round playoff games on their campus in December. But the CFP will collect all revenue from ticket sales and redistribute it to the conferences. However, schools will be able to keep the money made from the other game day revenue sources like the concessions and parking. And then the quarterfinals will be played in the bowl style of the Fiesta, Peach, Rose, and Sugar Bowls.
Well, I mean, very clearly here, it's quite literally all about the money and the way it gets distributed. I think that's where the power lies as well, even in the CFP just saying, you know what, like I'm keeping the money here, but you get the concessions and the parking. That's a big move, right? Especially if these teams are hosting it themselves. So what does this actually look like? How does the money get distributed?
Conferences will receive $4 million for each school that makes the CFP, and for each school that qualifies for the quarterfinal, there's an $8 million guarantee for the conferences, with schools receiving first round buys. Conferences will receive another $6 million for each school that reaches the semifinals and each school that plays in the national championship game. In total, that is $116 million distributed to conferences with teams in the CFP. Teams also get an additional $3 million to cover expenses for each round. So those travel, those hotels, things like that.
Oh, and could you remind me how much of that money is going to the NCAA?
0.
Oh, fantastic.
Straight to the conferences.
So with that knowledge of this new format, the CFP rankings just dropped earlier this week. I think that was the biggest headline of this past Tuesday. A pretty big deal.
Possibly.
So the CFP rankings just dropped, and what can we make of it?
We talked about it previously about how important this expanded playoff looks like in terms of the SEC and Big Ten staying happy. So with the CFP ranking versus the AP poll rankings that have been previously used earlier this season, there wasn't too much that differed except for Vanderbilt. They were ranked on the AP poll. They're not ranked in the CFP. They were the one team that was left out. Within the top 12, though, of the CFP rankings, 4 are in the Big Ten, 4 are in the SEC, 1 ACC, 1 Big 12, and 1 independent with Notre Dame, and 1 Group of 5 with Boise State. But the talk about strength of schedule has been brought up again. I mentioned before that with this expanded playoff, coaches and analysts don't know how that would play off in terms of these rankings and the playoff in general. And it has definitely played into how these rankings settled. Penn State, for example, is ranked 6th, and they are 7-1. Indiana is ranked 8th, but are 9-0. ESPN, when they announced these rankings, did a strength of schedule category and had ranked Indiana's schedule 103rd and Penn State as 28th. So yes, Penn State has a loss, but the CFP thought their schedule pushed them ahead of an undefeated Indiana. It's also important to note that Oregon being ranked 1st and Ohio State 2nd, but Ohio State not having a bye in the first round of the playoffs is because of the first round buys only going to the highest ranked conference champions in the Power 4 conferences. So with the 2 Big Ten teams being 1st and 2nd, Ohio State gets bumped to 5th, win in the playoff brackets. I also just find it super fascinating that schools will be able to host a playoff game on campus. Like I said before, those schools won't be keeping those ticketing sales, but still, think just about the partnership opportunities and honestly the logistics of hosting a playoff game. Obviously, you want to buy and you want to be those top 4 seeds, but at the same time, there's so much opportunity, I think, to host a playoff game at your school. So I'm excited to see who's able to host a playoff game. They are allowed to choose if they go off site. So in, let's say, a very, very hypothetical world, let's say like Stanford gets a bid to the CFP and they don't want to host it at their stadium, they can put it in Levi's Stadium down in Santa Clara. So it's like things like that. I would assume most colleges would want to keep it on campus, get that foot traffic, get that home field advantage. But I'm really excited to see who and how this looks like because, again, this is the first time it's expanding, the first time schools will be able to host a playoff game. So lots of change, even in terms of championships and just how internally these championships are being run.
I mean, I think it'll be super exciting, right? Some of my favorite childhood memories are at bowl games, and I think to have the CFP just be expanded will be a humongous deal. I think it'll be very, very exciting to see some of these teams host, right? It's like any other, I think for men's soccer right now, right, that they're in the ACC conference tournament before the NCAA big dance. I think it's super cool to see schools hosting, just being there rather than a neutral site. I think that'll be great for football. My one question, and this is just, I don't know much about it, so I am genuinely asking you, how is this fair for the schools to not be making the money from hosting a game? Like, because the way I understand it, and I could be very wrong here, the way I understand it is, all right, let me come in as the CFP, organize these games, this little tournament for you, right? If you want to call it that. I will tell you where to go. You will do the work, but I'll keep the money. Or are they bringing in new staff themselves, or how does this actually make sense? Who would agree to this?
That's a great question in terms of staffing. That's a very good point. But in terms of the ticketing sales, I see why they're doing that because then the first round buys, why would you want to be a buy? You would want to play that first round so you can host it at your stadium and get that revenue. So it's like because that first round gets a buy, you can't keep those ticketing sales because let's say Boise State travels a 12th seeded or Boise State would go to first seed Oregon. Oregon would be able to make so much money off of that playoff, but they can't because they're not playing that first round. So that's definitely why. But great question in terms of logistics, in terms of who's staff, because there's so many expenses that go into hosting at your site. So I think that is one of the pros of putting it offsite at, let's say, an NFL stadium. But yeah, great point right there, actually.
I would love to talk to an AD or even someone within the CFP just to get the proper explanation and put it on an Excel sheet or something, because you are getting the money, but I would imagine that the cost of entire staffing and all day activities would be more than that 6 million or 4 million that was received. And to compare it to pro sports again, because again, apparently this is pro sports now. So to compare to pro sports, the NFL has buy games as well. So wouldn't you just want to pay that team more? And like again, let's remember these prize amounts for going through. Give more money to the team that actually has a buy, and just let whoever's hosting keep the money, right?
I think they want to be fair in terms of how they distribute the money because I think the ticket sales, it's not a fixed price. It's going to fluctuate depending on who is in that playoff game, where it is, like things like that, transportation. Because like, you know what I mean? Like I think there's more variables if you were to do it that way. So they're trying to make it as set as possible. Um, so yeah, I'm interested to see if schools do decide to put it offsite.
Just to give you the perspective that I'm interested in, it's like it's like saying you do the work for me and I'll keep the money, right? Which is the employment argument with student athletes, but here it's at a bigger level. Hey, conference, hey, school, you take care of it, do the work for me. I'll take the credit and keep the money and I'll give you some pennies on the dollar for it. I don't know. I think that's interesting. I could be totally wrong. So would love to just sit down with somebody and talk about how that would actually work. But just some food for thought.
Yeah, great point.
Alrighty, I think that's all we have for today. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. Do we want to do some college basketball picks? Who do you think is going to win the Natty, men's and women's?
Oh my goodness, I'm not there yet. At least I'll plan accordingly. And I'll have it ready for next week.
Okay, amazing.
Because off the top of my head, I know who your two picks are, and I would just repeat it. So let me think through.
Yeah.
Let me think
because
through.
Mine aren't like groundbreaking picks.
Well, I'm not an expert in men's basketball or women's basketball, so but yes, off the top of my head, I would say the exact two that you have. And I don't want to do that. I want to make it interesting, you know? Although I will say I do love Duke men's basketball, and shout out to Sion, you know? So
he also had a great game. First time suiting up in the Duke jersey. He had, I believe, 11 points, played 20 plus minutes, I believe. So shout out Sion. Great start to his Duke season.
All right. So to everybody listening, we will owe you picks for next week. Next week's episode, big episode 21, breaking into the top percent of podcast scene. Shout out to Sion. Shout out to Duke. Cooper, come on the podcast. And yeah, I think that's it for today. If you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're on Spotify, please follow. Shout out to everybody on YouTube. I've been seeing the numbers go up. We've doubled since for sure the past couple weeks. We've doubled subscribers. So thank you guys so much. More content to come. We'll see you all next week.
Bye.